If you still miss that feeling of exploring a giant world, full of secrets, brutal bosses, and mysterious stories like in Elden Ring, this video is for you. Today we're going to dive into 10 new games that follow that same vibe. Dark worlds, intense combat, and that feeling of conquest with every difficult victory. Some are surprising indies, others come from big studios, but they all have something in common. They will test your patience, your curiosity, and your skill in the best from software style. If you're a fan of Elden Ring, get ready for a new challenge that will shake up your expectations in the Souls-like genre. Lords of the Fallen 2. This game, which arrives in 2026 for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, promises to deepen everything that fans loved in the first game, in addition to bringing even more brutal and fast combat, combined with a dark world that expands into two realities: life and the even more terrifying underworld called Umbral. Right off the bat, you feel that this is not a game to soften the difficulty, but for those who like to be tested to the limit of patience and skill. The combat in Lords of the Fallen 2 has evolved a lot compared to the previous game, and seems to have learned a lot from community feedback. The fights are faster and more decisive, and you really feel that each hit, dodge, and counterattack needs to be calculated. The system is aggressive and fluid, with ultra-violent executions that honestly give that feeling of power and reward each moment of tension overcome. Experimenting with different weapons, spells, and builds is part of the charm, because here there is no room for repeating the same tactic without adapting. The game's world is another strong point that draws attention. The idea of being able to cross between the living world and the Umbral, with its secret paths and terrifying enemies, adds a layer of unique exploration that should keep even the most experienced players intrigued. It's a dense, practically breathable atmosphere, where light is rare and the feeling that you are always on the edge of the abyss is constant. For those who enjoy that you don't know what will come after the next corner vibe, Lords of the Fallen 2 delivers perfectly. The bosses are, as expected, colossal, brutal, and absolutely memorable. Each encounter promises to be a true test of endurance and skill, with mechanics that require more than just memorizing patterns. The intensity is in staying calm and mastering the nuances of combat. The promise here is of epic battles worthy of the best games in the genre. And as I love this mix of tension and glory when defeating an almost impossible boss, I'm already counting the days for these experiences. An interesting aspect is the shared progression in cooperative mode, which means that you can take advantage of a journey together with friends without losing any of the progress. This expands the appeal for those who enjoy Souls-like, but prefer to face the challenges with company. The feeling of sharing that effort and that victory makes all the difference. In addition, the game is being developed on the powerful Unreal Engine 5, which will guarantee graphics and performance that fit perfectly into this dark and monstrous world. Lords of the Fallen 2 carries a darker, more brutal, and more ambitious vibe than ever before. If you enjoy Souls-like and are a fan of Elden Ring, get ready for a novelty that brings a totally different approach. Valor Mortis. The difference here? It's a first-person Souls-like, something uncommon in the genre which promises a visceral and immersive experience. You will play as William, a soldier of Napoleon's Grande Armée, resurrected with corrupted powers who fights against a plague that devastated 19th century Europe in an alternate universe. The dark and heavy atmosphere already throws you into a classic horror scenario, combined with a narrative full of conspiracies and mysteries. What really draws attention in Valor Mortis is the combat, which mixes the demands of Souls-like with the first-person perspective, something that may seem intimidating, but surprisingly fluid. The system requires you to master parries, dodges, melee, and ranged attacks, and also use supernatural abilities to turn the game around. The feeling is of a brutal ballet where timing and positioning make all the difference, and each mistake can be costly. For those who like that adrenaline of feeling each hit on the skin, this approach makes everything more tense and personal. The explorable environments are inspired by 19th century Europe, but with an alternative twist corrupted by the mysterious plague and supernatural entities. The level design has a touch inspired by Metroidvania, encouraging careful explorations to find secrets and resources that will help you survive. The setting is a separate chapter, mixing historical elements with gothic horror, which creates a suffocating and intriguing atmosphere at the same time, perfect for those who love to sleep with the light on. The game brings an interesting mix of traditional weapons from the Napoleonic era, such as swords and muskets, with magical powers and abilities derived from the corruption that inhabits you. This gives an interesting diversity when it comes to assembling your combat style, whether more aggressive or tactical, balancing between physical attacks and supernatural abilities. In addition, the progression is designed to reward experimentation, making each death teach something new and unlock tools that will strengthen you. Valor Mortis does not leave aside the brutality and challenge that Souls-like fans love. Huge bosses and horrifying enemies require patience, observation, and mastery of the system to be defeated. The feeling is that with each step, you are in an almost impossible fight against overwhelming forces, and this creates that typical tension of the genre that keeps the adrenaline high. And the addition of the first-person perspective makes everything more intense, as if you were really on the battlefield fighting for survival. For those who appreciate a Souls-like experience that escapes the traditional and still brings a dense and dark story, Valor Mortis is a promise worth keeping an eye on. With a release scheduled for 2026, the game will land on PS5, Xbox Series, and PC, and should conquer those who like technical combat, loaded atmospheres, and challenges that require thought and quick reflexes. For those who enjoy Souls-like with an anime vibe and dense narrative, Code Vein 2 is something you definitely need to have on your radar for 2026. The continuation of the first Code Vein returns with everything, using the power of Unreal Engine 5 to deliver a devastated post-apocalyptic world where humans called Revenants try to survive a mysterious calamity. The game promises an adventure that crosses time, putting you to alter events of the past as a central part of the story. Something that adds a cool layer of mystery and strategy that gives a special charm. The combat in Code Vein 2 is one that mixes fast action with a tactical depth that requires patience to master. You will need to know how to read the patterns of enemies to attack at the right time and take advantage of a unique blood system, where draining blood from enemies releases powerful abilities, the so-called Forme. The customization of the character and weapons is more refined, making it possible to combine varied fighting styles, which is great for those who enjoy experimenting with different builds and feeling in control of their own way of playing. A point that caught my attention is the emphasis that the game gives to allies, who are not just common NPCs, but true battle partners with abilities that complement your style. They enter and leave the fight naturally, and you can even explore the relationship with these characters, adding an emotional layer that, for me, differentiates Code Vein 2 a lot from other Souls, like more cold and focused only on challenge. This makes the journey more human, even with all that dark and desperate atmosphere. Speaking of atmosphere, the scenario is dark, but full of details that we love in Souls-like. Decadent ruins, bizarre monsters, and interconnected areas that reward careful exploration. The feeling of being in a collapsing world where each step is dangerous is very well constructed and makes the game stick from beginning to end. I love how they managed to mix that stylized look with such a heavy atmosphere, creating a contrast that catches even those who are not so fond of the anime style. The bosses are, of course, challenging in the right measure, and each encounter unfolds as a test of your patience, timing, and creativity. They brought new mechanics to give variety and demand constant adaptation, which avoids that annoying feeling of just memorizing patterns. I personally like when a game forces me to be always alert, and Code Vein 2 seems to deliver this with great competence. keeping the adrenaline at the ceiling with each epic battle. Code Vein 2 is not just another Souls-like. It is for those who want a story that unfolds in an impactful way, deep combat, and the chance to explore both the past and the present in this devastated world. If Elden Ring conquered you with its challenge and freedom, Code Vein 2 may be your next obsession for an experience that mixes emotion, strategy, and that relentless challenge that we love so much.
I'll never forget the good times we spent together.
If you enjoy Souls-like and always thought you needed a game that mixes that brutality with a truly dense open world, Dynasthir may be the answer you were waiting for. Released now in November 2025, it brings a vibe very inspired by the Middle Ages, with a dark and obscure touch, which throws you to explore a universe full of mysteries and danger. The game's atmosphere is one that catches you slowly with a feeling of desolation, but with surprises at every corner. Perfect for those who like to get lost in a world that requires attention and strategy to survive. The combat is one of the game's biggest bets, and it arrives with that fast and dynamic touch that I love in Souls-like, but with an extra spice. An adrenaline bar that replaces the traditional stamina. This gives a feeling of cool fluidity, because the system rewards those who play at the right rhythm, staying far from that classic fatigue of conventional stamina bars. Each attack, dodge, and parry carry a real weight, and mastering this mechanic is essential to do well. For me, this innovation makes the combat more natural and exciting. A highlight that cannot be left unmentioned is the total freedom that the open world offers, unlike most Souls-likes that adopt a more linear or semi-open design. In Dynasthir, you have the feeling of being in front of a vast territory full of secrets, ranging from giant ferns to forgotten ruins, and methodical exploration is part of the challenge and charm of the game. If you enjoy discovering shortcuts, hidden places, and stories carved into the scenery, this is the type of game that really rewards this type of dedication. The enemies and bosses are a mixture of bizarre creatures, grotesque monsters, and dark warriors that keep the tension high all the time. The attacks are merciless, and the game does not fail to remind you that each mistake can be fatal. For those who enjoy that challenge that hits the emotional and the reflex, Dynasthir fulfills its role correctly. It is one of those experiences in which victory tastes even better after each hard-fought defeat. The setting caught me in a special way. It has a Morrowind vibe with a touch of Demon Souls, and this creates a scenario that is both familiar to fans of the genre but also unique thanks to the details that the game adds, such as the psychedelic flora and fauna and that atmosphere with sensory colors, almost hypnotic. This visual and sound identity made me want to explore more and more each area, because it never seems to be just walking and killing. Dynasthir is for those who want a Souls-like that adds depth and soul to the genre, without giving up the hard but fair challenge. It is a well-made mix of open design, technical combat, and immersive setting that should please those who loved Elden Ring, but want something with its own personality and that more indie spice. Dinoblade is a Souls-like that brings a very unconventional proposal. You play as a young Spinosaurus in a prehistoric world, transformed by a cataclysmic event. Instead of the classic knights or medieval monsters, here you face other species of dinosaurs, some equipped with weapons such as swords and crossbows. This already puts a unique spice and makes the experience a mixture between brutal action and that ancestral fascination for giant reptiles. The combat of Dinoblade is intense and dynamic, with a lot of emphasis on dodging, parrying, and heavy attacks using a colossal sword. All in the Souls-like style, only with that Jurassic touch that makes everything more exciting. Playing with a dinosaur that wields a huge weapon makes everything visually different and even fun in an unexpected way. It is necessary to master the rhythm of the battles because the enemies are relentless, and the bosses make a point of punishing each of your mistakes, so the tension and adrenaline will always be in maximum mode. The open world of the game also draws attention. It is vast, full of environmental diversity, and full of secrets, which combines with the exploration vibe that we love in games of this style. You really feel small and vulnerable in a place where nature is wild and full of constant dangers. This makes all the difference in immersion, since each corner of the scenario seems to have been designed to challenge and reward you at the same time. Visually, the game has that more indie style, but with a very own charm. The art direction bets on elaborate scenarios where the lighting and the design of the creatures add a dense and brutal atmosphere. The soundtrack accompanies this energy with compositions that increase the feeling of urgency and imminent danger, putting the player in an adventure that is both challenging and cinematic. A point that I found interesting is that despite the unusual theme, the game does not lose focus on the quality of the gameplay. The mechanics of progression, skills, and customization are still well worked, allowing you to assemble varied strategies to face the different types of enemies. This shows that the team behind the Dinoblade understood what fans of the genre are looking for: challenge, depth, and that taste of discovery at each step. For those who are tired of the traditional patterns of Souls-like and want something with a totally different visual and concept, Dinoblade arrives to shake up the genre in 2026. If you are a fan of the challenge of Elden Ring and want to experience an adventure that mixes dinosaurs with huge swords, this indie is a dish full of novelty with that hardcore vibe that we love. If you like games that challenge you from beginning to end, Duel Corp may be that surprise you were waiting for in 2025. The coolest thing is that it mixes the best of Souls-like with a more modern proposal full of possibilities. It brings a combat gameplay based on direction, where your movements and attacks need to be precise. Think of a faster and more fluid version of the classics of FromSoft. You can play alone or in cooperative mode, which makes the experience even more fun and challenging, especially in those encounters with bosses that seem to crush anyone on the first try. Another thing that caught my attention is the freedom in creating your character. Different from other Souls-like that put you in a more closed vibe, here you have an open and unrestricted class system, being able to assemble your hero in the way you prefer. Want a warrior who wields a giant sword and also casts spells? You can. Prefer something more agile with quick attacks and precise evasions? It's in the game. This customization gives an air of experimentation that I love and makes you feel really in control. The universe of Duel Corp is all made in Unreal Engine, with graphics pixelated that give a retro vibe, but with a very modern look and full of details. The art of the game is a bit like those classic RPGs in pixel, but with an impressive fluidity and scenarios that vary a lot. Exploring this world full of dangers, secrets, and varied enemies gives a feeling that each game can be different, because the game also has a mechanic of ingredients generated procedurally, making each game unique. The combats, as I mentioned, are the star here. You need to master directions, attacks, and dodges in a way that only those who like challenges will really appreciate. The enemies and bosses make a point of testing your patience and ability, with attacks that vary a lot and require you to think fast and play calmly at the same time. In addition, the co-op multiplayer helps to divide this weight, and playing with a friend can transform an almost impossible battle into a more satisfactory victory, a vibe that I enjoy a lot. Another point that I liked a lot was the pixelated aesthetic that combines with that dark atmosphere of dark fantasy with a dark fantasy vibe. The soundtrack accompanies this heavy vibe well, immersing you headfirst in this challenging world. It gives the feeling that you are in an epic saga, an endless battle against nightmare creatures in dark and mysterious places. Duel Corp arrives as a promise that it is still possible to create a Souls-like that mixes innovation, heavy punch, and a dose of nostalgia with the pixel look. If you are tired of traditional games or want an experience that requires reaction, strategy, and courage, this game is one of the bets that deserves attention in 2025. It can be a great choice for those who like to spend hours trying to beat that boss that seems invincible, but that in the end, you know that you will only get with persistence and skill. If you're a fan of Souls-like games and want something that escapes the European medieval standard, Loulan, the Cursed Sand is a gem that deserves your attention. Set on the ancient Silk Road in the Far East, the game puts you in control of the Cursed Sand, a skeletal warrior with sand powers who returns to the lost kingdom of Loulan to seek his beloved princess. The setting already delivers a different vibe, mixing Chinese mythology with an atmosphere rich in history and mystery, all in an isometric perspective reminiscent of classic hack-and-slash games, but with a modern twist. Loulan's gameplay is focused on direct and technical combat, where you can switch between two forms, sand form and bone form. Each offers a completely different fighting style, with the sand form standing out for its agility and quick attacks with elemental powers, while the bone form is slower but brutal, perfect for facing larger groups. This alternation is not just visual, it changes how you approach enemies and how you solve the challenges of the map, which brings a very interesting strategic layer. Combat is not just brute force. You need to master the perfect timing to dodge, block, and counterattack, because the enemies here are varied and require you to constantly change tactics. The bosses in particular promise to be very demanding and will test your patience and learning of the mechanics in the classic style of the genre. For those who enjoy that more cerebral challenge, this is a treat, because each celebrated victory tastes even better after a hard fight. In addition to the fighting, the game features delicate exploration with puzzles and secret areas, where your sand manipulation skills help you discover secrets and overcome obstacles. This gives you a break from the action to breathe and get more involved with the world, which is visually very beautiful and well-crafted, with scenarios inspired by the arid and mysterious landscapes of the Silk Road. The art manages to convey well the atmosphere of a kingdom in ruins, full of stories to tell. The sound and soundtrack also contribute directly to the immersion, bringing sounds that refer to the wind and sand, as well as music that emphasizes that feeling of tragedy and hope. All of this creates a package that is not just a game, but a complete sensory experience, which can hold the player for hours seeking to understand every detail of this tragic story of the Cursed Guardian. Loulan, the Cursed Sand, brings to 2025 a Souls-like experience with its own personality, which mixes Oriental culture, technical combat, and strategic exploration. If you want to get away from the obvious a little and venture on an intense, dark, and full of exotic charm journey, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on this title. One of the most interesting promises that are coming to PC and PS5. Mistfall Hunter is coming in 2026 as a third-person action RPG that mixes elements of Souls-like with a PvE extraction system. That is, you will face enemies controlled by AI and human players in battles that require tactics and a lot of attention. The setting is a dark fantasy in which the gods have fallen in a catastrophic war, and you take on the role of a hunter in the midst of this devastated world, who needs to fight, collect resources, and manage to escape alive to guarantee your rewards. What I found cool in the game is that it mixes that visceral combat of traditional Souls-like games with different classes that have distinct combos and abilities, creating a very strategic and very dynamic. You can assemble your character with different talents and equipment, which opens space for unique game styles, whether going for the beating and melee attacks, using magic and quick blows, or betting on stealth and ranged attacks. For those who like to experiment with builds, Mistfall Hunter brings this full plate. The extraction system brings a very interesting element of tension. After weakening and defeating monsters, you need to ring the bell to activate the escape portal. But while this happens, other players can try to prowl and take your reward. This adds a layer of danger and strategy not only against the enemies, but also against other hunters, which pleases me a lot because it brings that mixture of cooperation and constant distrust, typical of games that focus on multiplayer. Visually, the game impresses with detailed graphics and fluid animations, and the feeling of being in a world half in collapse, full of creatures corrupted by what they call Gildan mist, generates a dark and dense atmosphere that speaks too much with the dark and dangerous vibe that we enjoy in games of the genre. The setting has that mythological vibe, full of rough references that enrich the storytelling. The battles against bosses are moments that left me really stuck on the screen, each asking for attack and defense patterns that test your mastery of the game. Mistfall Hunter does not forgive mistakes, but rewards those who study each movement of the enemy. It's that type of game that you feel improving with each attempt, and that the satisfaction of winning is immense. Mistfall Hunter is a proposal that mixes in an interesting way the Souls-like combat with the tension of the PvPvE and the extraction format, creating a tactical thriller in third person. If you enjoy challenging your skills, assembling builds, and like the idea of an unpredictable dispute against enemies and players, it is very worthwhile to stay connected to this release for PC and Xbox Series in 2026.
Faiths torn asunder, and all that still lives before the end. They war and struggle in anguish and despair. But I have yet to see the ember that can rise against the dark.
Lunarium is an atmospheric action RPG that arrives with a vibe a bit different from what we usually see in the Souls-like genre. You play as Avva, a light-armored warrior who partners with Loulan, a mysterious star traveler. Together, they embark on an intense journey to save a world that seems suspended between light and darkness, with a narrative that flirts with fantasy and mystery, bringing something quite immersive for those who like a well-built universe. Lunarium's combat has that technical touch that we expect from a Souls-like, with precise attacks, quick dodges, and parries that ask for perfect timing. What caught my attention was the fluidity and the weight of these movements, a rare balance between being brutal and elegant at the same time. The gameplay still bets on an isometric system, different from the traditional 3D, which completely changes the perspective and adds a unique charm, almost remembering games like Ender Lilies, but with its own identity. Another cool thing in the game is the use of a mechanic called resonance, which allows you to accumulate a resource by attacking enemies and then release super powerful special attacks. This creates a combat cycle that rewards the aggressive player who knows how to position himself to get the most out of the blows. This dynamic is great to give that feeling of mastery and reward when you manage to fit combos and abilities in the right order. The world that Lunarium presents is full of beauty and dangers, with environments that vary between ruins, mystical areas, and places that seem to have come out of a half-dark dream. The visuals and the sound design together create an atmosphere that pulled me into the game, a place where each step seems important, and where resting at the right points reminds a lot of the famous checkpoints of the Souls-like, bringing that familiarity that we love. The bosses, from what can already be seen, are challenges that will test not only your skill, but also your patience and the ability to read the attack patterns. It has a lot of potential for epic battles, of those that you take a few in the face, learn, and come back more sharp to win. If you enjoy that cold in the belly that only a good boss fight provides, Lunarium seems to be walking in the right direction. NiOh 3 is that action RPG that comes to shake even more the Souls-like scene in 2026. The game takes place in 1622 in the bloody era of feudal Japan, and you take control of Tokugawa Takecho, the grandson of the famous Tokugawa Ieyasu, who needs to fight against hordes of yokais to save his legacy and dethrone his rebel brother. The story promises to be epic, with elements of time travel and twists that only a good samurai RPG can deliver. The combat of NiOh 3 returns with everything, maintaining that technical and brutal touch that we love in the series. The player can switch instantly between two very distinct styles: the samurai style, focused on powerful attacks and kai control, and the ninja style, which bets on agility, evasion, and quick attacks, in addition to using ninja tools that give extra depth in battles. This dynamic exchange makes everything more strategic and also much more fluid when facing enemies. In addition, Team Ninja has added a more open exploration, with a freer map full of shrines, hidden chests, and secret areas that stimulate curiosity and careful exploration. You can also climb cliffs and reach suspended islands, greatly increasing the verticality and giving a respite for those who like to get out of the traditional linearity of the series. The enemies continue to be scary and relentless, with an even greater variety of yokais and bosses that require attention to timing and Kui resistance. The battles against the bosses promise to be even more epic, with attacks that test your reflexes and strategy. The game demands that perfect balance between aggressiveness and patience, something that only NiOh knows how to deliver so well. Visually, the game is a spectacle, utilizing all the potential of the PlayStation 5 and PC to bring effects of light, shadows, and textures that give life to this feudal Japan loaded with magic and danger. The details in the characters, in the weapons, and in the scenario create a tense and involving atmosphere, reinforced by the soundtrack that mixes traditional Japanese tones with epic music. If Elden Ring was a bloodbath and technique that you loved, NiOh 3 is a sure bet to continue that vibe. It maintains the essence that made the series a success, but still adds important novelties in combat and exploration, delivering a robust and passionate package for 2026. If you are a fan of these challenges, this is another title to leave on your radar.
貴殿見ぬ顔だが、どこの手のものだ。
徳川、名は竹千代。